Hey guys, um, hi, it's Carl here. This is Learning Unit 6 and the last learning unit that you have to work through. Another tricky learning unit similarly to 5 and tricky because you've got the prescribed works. So these are the 3 prescribed works. You'll remember from Learning Unit 5, they give you articles. You've got to go read through the articles and then sift through the articles to get to the specific learning outcomes or the information that fulfills the learning outcomes. There's the learning outcomes on the screen. There's 7 of them. I've listed them here within the different articles next to them. So what the idea is, you'd go look at the learning unit. So let's take Learning Unit 5, outline the 4 phases in entrepreneurship according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. You'll go read Akinyemi et al. You'll go find the information in there. You'll make notes. You'll study those notes. And then if they ask you a question about it, you will then apply that to the question in the exam. I have made my own notes, and I've made these notes available. If you go under more resources, you'll find my notes there. Please, guys, remember those notes are not exhaustive. Those are my notes that I use to do slides and that type of thing from. You would still have to go read those articles. I don't mind you using what I've got on these slides in conjunction with those notes, but please use the original article and make more exhaustive notes for yourself so that you're sure that in the exam you have got enough information to be able to properly answer the question. As always, these are not teaching sessions. These are tutor sessions, and therefore I will go through the slides. I think there's 12 or 13 slides addressing all 7 those learning outcomes, but I won't address all the information on each slide. I'll give you 1 or 2 of them. It's up to you to go through all the detailed information and study it in detail. Right, let's get stuck in. Learning outcome 1 is the concept of the emerging economy. So we're talking in this unit about emerging economies and entrepreneurship and how these 2 things affect each other. Now, the classical definition of an emerging economy is a nation with significant economic growth and development transition from a low income to a middle or high income status. So it's an economy that's been struggling, an economy that's not been a world power, and they're now in the transition phase from that economy. They're busy developing into a middle income or high income status for their population and for their country. So it's a country that's busy, a country and an economy that's busy growing. Now, there's numerous characteristics that identify this concept. And the idea is, if you think about it, and there's a whole host of bullets there that explain this in more detail. But if you think about it, what's going to happen? The economy is going to start growing. Where does economies grow? Typically in the cities, the economies start to grow. So industries and so on are clustered around cities because industry is reliant on each other, because one industry needs another industry as their input so that they can manufacture, do an output. That output might be the input for the next industry. So they cluster themselves together in cities. The problem is, what do they need for that? For that, they need labor. So what happens is labor comes from the rural areas, moves into the urban areas. And in the urban areas, those labor get jobs. They earn money because they've got money in their pockets. They can spend the money, which means there must be shops for them to spend it, because now there's a need for a shop. So somebody can open a shop. Because there's people with money coming to the shop. The problem is you need people in that shop to service those people. So you employ more people. More people have money in their pockets. They spend this money in more shops and so on, etc., etc. And that is how an economy grows. So the basis of economic growth is to create jobs. And those jobs place money in people's pockets. They spend that money, which creates further growth. That is why, and I've said this many times to many classes, and I can't recall if I've said it to you guys specifically, but that is why we need to understand that government's job is not to create jobs. That's not government's job. Government's job is to create an environment in which jobs created, in which people want to start businesses, in which they want to start their little industry, employ 3, 4, 5 people, put money in those 3, 4, 5 people's pockets. Those people then go out and put money in other people's pockets, and that's how we grow the economy. But the key thing is government needs to create the framework, the regulatory framework that encourages that. And there's a number of other things that they need to do. Now, if we look through those bullets, you'll see things like structural changes. I spoke about people moving from the rural areas where they probably were in charge of or doing agriculture, moving to industries and services in the city. People are gaining income. There's a rise in the middle class. To be able to facilitate all this, government needs to build roads, lay electricity, lay water, etc. So your infrastructure needs to develop. And these type of things is happening in countries like Brazil, India, and China. Now, if you think of those, Brazil, India, and China, you should have a little light going ting, ting, ting. Those are the BRICS countries. There's 2 countries missing there. And you've got to ask yourself, are those 2 countries that are missing there, are they still emerging economies? Do they meet these criteria? Have they gone stagnant? And what's the reasons for those countries not being, in your opinion, on that list of emerging economies anymore? So now you've got strategic entrepreneurship within an emerging economy. So how do you approach yourself starting a business within these emerging economies? And there's 2 basic ways, the bricolage and the effectuation approach. We've dealt with both of these approaches previously in this course. And when I say in this course, I mean over the course of the 3 years that you've been doing entrepreneurship. Just excuse me for a moment. Sorry, I had to take a sip of water. I felt a frog growing in my throat. So we've dealt with these 2 approaches in different guises. And I must admit, when I saw bricolage for the first time, I had no clue. It's the first time I've ever seen this word. I looked it up, and it's an art form meaning putting together a collage from found objects. Never heard it before, but it makes sense. So the bricolage approach to entrepreneurship and to strategic entrepreneurship is the Nike approach. Just do it. So whatever you have, pull those resources together. Improvise. Do what you can. Get your business up and running, and just go for it, right? And what you have, you have. What you don't have, you don't have, and you make do. And that's how you into this emerging economy, because remember, you want to ride this wave. This economy is growing, so you want to be in as early as possible, because you want to grow with this economy and grow your business as this economy develops. The second approach, the effectuation approach, says no, hang on. Take what you have. Don't just run into it, but leverage off those resources and find people. Create partnerships, go speak to people, create a network of people. And this can be suppliers, government officials, people who would potentially be competitors. Speak to these guys, get a pool of resources and the leverage of your available means and grow a business from that. So the bricolage approach is sort of you going it on your own and using what you have and going for it. The effectuation approach is more an approach where you're saying, I will use what I have, but I'll use what I have where my strengths are. I will leverage off those strengths to get others involved and others to help me and me to help others so that we can grow together stronger. Which one's better? I don't really know. For me, it depends on the personality of the entrepreneur and what you are doing, even the type of business that you are in. But those are the two approaches. Now, guys, let's quickly talk exams. I'll have the national prep session. I think it's on the 8th. I'll send an announcement out. But the fact of the matter is, let's talk quickly about something about the exam. If they ask you for 2 approaches to strategic entrepreneurship in an emerging economy, you know 10 approaches. It's vitally important that when you study for this exam, you study To differentiate between the two approaches to strategic entrepreneurship in an emerging economy is the bricolage approach and the effectuation approach. Effectuation and bricolage is approaches in an emerging economy. So that you remember these two approaches is in the context of an emerging economy, because they can ask you other stuff that's in other chapters and other learning units that also talks to the approaches. So make sure you understand the approaches in terms of the heading, in terms of the chapter. Where does it fit in? And that's vitally important for you guys in this exam. Moving on. The 4 contextual settings in an emerging economy. So there's 4 things that changes in an emerging economy that creates the situation for the entrepreneur to enter. It's the temporal, the institutional, the social, and the spatial context. And these things are contexts that are changing as the economy emerges and grows into a large economy. The first is the temporal. That's the phase in which your business is. Where is your business? And we're going to look at business phases from a different angle, once again, different than how we've previously looked at it later on in this session. So, are you just a startup? Or are you already a running firm? And that context changes, obviously, as the economy changes and as your firm changes. Institutional context. Government makes rules and changes the rules as the economy grows. If you're lucky, they make the rules easier for you to enter the economy, to make the economy grow even faster. If you're unlucky, and unfortunately this is what happens mostly, the rules become more formal, more more complex. And it's not just rules, it's norms, it's standards, it's the way in which we operate in businesses. Obviously, if the economy is going to emerge, there's a social context that changes. People move from the rural areas into the cities. That in itself creates a new social context. It's also how your networks change, who you connect with, how you connect with people, how you connect with other economies for that matter. And then the spatial change, how the geography of the place where you're working changes. How easy is it now to move from place A to place B? How easy is it to communicate with people? So those are the 4 contextual changes that you will face. Obviously, there's challenges, and that's your learning outcome number 4. The challenges in the emerging economy, they pretty obvious. The key thing, or one of the key ones, or the one that I want to highlight here, is your macroeconomic environment and how the macroeconomic environment affects an emerging economy. Macroeconomic environment, remember, far external, nothing you can do about it. And if you look at the South African context at the moment, our economy is not doing really well. And there's 2 basic reasons. A weak rand, which we can say is to a certain extent an internal affair, but it remains macro. And then obviously the high oil prices. You know, when you've got a rand dollar around 18, 19, and you're looking at an oil price that's fluctuating between $80 and $90. And we come from a context, if we go back 3, 4, 5 years, we come from a context where the rand dollar was 16 and the oil price was $60. That makes a massive difference on what we're paying for petrol, diesel, and those type of things. And that influences all our pricing. Everything gets transported. Everything needs petrol, diesel, whether you the guy out in the farm busy making corn, or you the person busy baking bread, or you the person selling the bread in the store, doesn't really make a difference. Diesel, petrol, transport costs, it hits everybody, and it hits the consumer. Remember what I said right at the beginning? How does an economy grow? Jobs are created because people have money in people's pockets. People spend that money, and when they spend that money, more jobs are created and the economy grows. Now everything's more expensive. So in essence, you have less money in your pocket because your money can buy less. Because you're buying less or can afford to buy less, there's less jobs being created. When there's less jobs being created, there's less money being put in people's pockets. And that's how your economy shrinks. And that's what's been happening to South Africa. There's another one I want to highlight on this, and that's the stifling tax structures is a problem, but the high regulatory burdens is another problem that South Africa specifically struggles. It's not easy to open a business. There's a lot of hoops you've got to jump through, a lot of registrations you have to do, and that stifles the growth of business. It's a problem for South Africa, and it's something that we really need to look at to make it easier for people to start businesses so that they can create more jobs. Okay, I spoke about phases earlier. Here we go, learning outcome number 5, or there we are, the 4 phases in entrepreneurship. So, guys, if they ask this in the exam, bunches of students are going to get this wrong. They're not going to get it wrong because they don't know it. They're going to get it wrong because they're going to come up with their own 4 phases, because they're going to think them out, because they're not going to have studied the 4 phases according to the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. So make sure you study it in that way. These are not easy. We know these. We don't necessarily know these words or the way in which they ask this, but we know the phases. A conception phase is when you think about an idea, when you think, you have that light bulb moment, or you've contemplated a problem and come up with a solution. Then the startup phase, they also talk about the birth phase. That's when the business starts up. And interestingly enough, they specifically put time frames to it. I'm not a great adherer to time frames in terms of, when you talk about planning, people sort of short, medium, long-term planning, and people tell you short term is a year, and medium is 3 to 5, and long term is 5 to 15, or whatever the case may be. It's all contextual, and for me this is contextual as well. But for the purposes of having an examination, the startup phase lasts the first year. The persistence phase or survival phase, this is when you're building the business, you're gaining some experience, you're trying to get the business to really start naturally, organically growing. It's 3.5 years, and then after 3.5 years, you established the business is a viable business. It's running, and we know in South Africa it's actually the 5-year mark that you want to achieve. But yeah, for the purposes of this global entrepreneurship monitor, says 3.5 years, and you should. Moving rapidly along, we move into more South African context, and we start looking at the township economy. And then we look at the township economy because the township economy plays a very important role in the larger South African context and the larger economy of South Africa. And although I'm contextualizing this within the South African framework, we need to see this in a bigger context, international context. So the whole world, whether you're in I think they call the favelas in Brazil, or you in any country in the world, you have these urban, some people will refer to them slums, where the poorer people stay. In India, they call them the slums, typically lower caste people that stay there. But there's an economy that is local within that area. So in those areas, there's a separate production, distribution, and consumption of products and services, separate from the formal economy. It's typically lower income, historically disadvantaged people. In our case, disadvantaged because of legality in the past, because of the apartheid government. In other countries, it's simply economic. In India, there's a very, very strong segregation as well. I won't call it apartheid, but it's very close to that. And that the segregation is along castes. And if you're a lower caste, you can never become higher caste. It's where you're born, or into what you are born. You're that caste, you remain that caste. But these economies are very community centric, and it's based on several things, and based on several reasons. So the key thing is, historically, these people have been excluded from the economy. They've been, through legal means, they've been excluded from the formal economy. So they created their own economy. So it was difficult for people to create capital. And how do we create capital? We buy property. It's the easiest way of creating capital. If you buy a piece of land and you build something on it and you sell it, in almost all cases, the capital that you get out will be more than the capital that have been put in. So you've gained capital. And they could not accumulate this capital, didn't have access to credit, so they created their own informal economy. This informal economy operates outside our normal economy and outside the rules, regulations, etc. set out by government, and they have their own rules and regulations. But this is a vibrant economy, and for many people, their livelihood is dependent on this economy. And a key part of that economy is the so-called stokvel. Now, stokvels, I don't know if something like this exists in other countries, but it's basically a savings plan that's community driven. Now, I've listed a whole bunch of stokvels. This is not out of the article. This I found elsewhere in the website of the South African Stokvel Association, I believe they call themselves. I found these, and I just wanted to highlight to you that there's different type of stokvels. For those of you that don't know what a stokvel is, the most basic, which is the rotational stokvel club, works as follows. A group of us come together. Say we're 6 people. We determine what contribution we're each going to give, and it's typically a pretty significant contribution. So, but let's say we all earn 10,000 rands a month, and then we all decide, okay, we're going to give 1,500 rand each. So each month, everybody puts 1,500 rands in the pot, and depending on the system, we decide we'll draw lots. So we're 6 people, 1,500 into the pot each, that's 9,000 rands. We draw lots, the lot falls on me. I get that 9,000 rands in month 1. Month 2, everybody puts contributions in. The other 5 remaining members draw lots. One of them, they get the 9,000 rands bonus that month. And so we go around until all 6 have had a turn, and then we start over again. And then obviously it becomes more complex, where you have grocery stokvels where people contribute, and at the end of the year, it's a savings plan in essence. At the end of the year, all those monies are used, and you go to a large store, you try to arrange a discount, and then you buy a set list of groceries for everybody for the Christmas period. Social clubs, for example, those stokvels, what they do is everybody contributes to have a nice big party once a month, etc. So on. So these are in essence savings clubs that have been started within this informal community. Look at those numbers. Numbers don't lie. The top numbers I'm not so much interested in, except bullet number 4. Only 4% goes into investments of the stokvel money, and that's concerning because that's a way that the stokvels can grow and grow capital. But look at that last number. The overall stokvel business is worth 44 billion rand. So that's the money locked up in those stokvels, and that's 2.6 billion rand a year that's distributed among members. We have, at last count, something like 62, 63 million people in South Africa. 11 million of them are involved in stokvels. 1/6 of our economy is involved in stokvels. It's a huge part of the economy. And that is an opportunity as well that could be used in many ways. We need to remember that stokvels are probably then the biggest money circulator within the township community, and formal economy money is trapped in that informal economy because money goes into the township and a lot of that money stays in that township. The key takeaway from this is there's a huge opportunity for some kind of a formal community bank to take these stokvels, formalize them. Many banks have tried to dip into this. So if you walk into African Bank, Capitec Bank, and many FNB, these banks, and you say, I want a stokvel account, they will open a stokvel account, an account into which you can deposit the money, and which then 1 or 2 of the group will have signing rights. And obviously there's a big trust issue there, but people will work with trust, and banks have capitalized on this. But what the suggestion is from Manyaka Bishelu is that there's actually an opportunity to start a community-driven bank. So the Soweto Bank or the Langa Bank, that is a bank that's owned and driven fully by the community. Okay, guys, that's what I have for you in terms of the last chapter. As I said, please make sure that you read my slides in conjunction with the articles and the notes on Learning Unit 6, Carl. That's a typo. So that you form your own picture. I would definitely advise you to read at least one of the articles, that you've got an overall picture, but the articles are so diverse you actually have to read them all. Okay, guys, thank you very much. We'll talk once more on the 8th of November, which will be the National Exam Prep session, and we'll go over what I think you should do to prepare yourself for that exam. Okay, thank you so much. Keep well.